Because of the following special broadcast, The Lucy Show and The Andy Griffith Show will not be presented this evening.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Terrificon, Connecticut's biggest Comic-Con, is back at the Mohegan Sun Expo Center in Uncasville, Connecticut on August 16th through the 18th. See your favorite stars from TV and film and shop for comic books, toys and memorabilia. With top creators from Marvel and DC, costume contests with prizes, and so much more. Tickets on sale now at Terrificon.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's time again for another Word Balloon Live, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Always happy to welcome Bob Greenberger back to Word Balloon and have a nice
so nice to be back, John.
Absolutely, man. God, and we don't have to, although it was a pleasure to do the show with you where we talked about Ramona Fradon.
Yes.
Much happier subjects today as we look at another one of your Kickstarter campaigns for your excellent anthology series, Thrilling Adventure. This is the 2025 edition. And for the viewers, if you look to the extreme right, you see the brand new cover for the book. Who painted that?
Gentleman by the name of Jeff Hayes. He's been doing a lot of pulp-inspired covers, and good guy.
That's great, man. No, it's gorgeous. You're about hold on one second. Come on, my thing's not moving off. Get off of there. Where is it? Come on. I don't know why my button is being stubborn. Eventually, it'll be back to us. But you're about halfway through your
53% to be exact, and we're on track to make goal. I'd love to get past that, just because the first 3 volumes have managed to have illustration.
Oh, Bob dropped for a second. All right, we'll get him back. This is great, everybody, and we'll get into details with Bob. But a lot of your favorite writers and Word Balloon guests are involved with this campaign and have been involved with the Thrilling Adventure anthologies moving forward. And we're talking about guys like Paul Kupperberg and Michael Jan Friedman, who have been on the show, and a lot more. But Bob is back. And
I don't know what happened. It dropped.
I don't know, man. Yeah. But that's all right. We're back now. And so you were saying that this guy who did the covers and stuff has done a lot of other pulp covers. But as I was just saying, I was just telling people that the amount of writers that you have are great. And you got old favorites like our buddies Mike Friedman and Paul Kupperberg.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let you go through the list, but I know you have new people as well.
Well, being a Crazy 8 book, I always throw the door open to my fellow Crazy 8 writers. And Aaron Rosenberg, Glenn Hellman, Hildy Silverman, Mary Fran, Mike Friedman, Paul Kupperberg, and Roscoe Chimero have volunteered to come back and do more stories. But just as I changed cover artists going from Gary Carbon to Jeff Hayes, I decided I wanted to freshen up the outside writers, and everyone in the lineup this time around is new. They have not written for Thrilling Adventure before, although they are very familiar names.
Yeah, God, Christopher Priest, Dan Abnett, Elliot Maggin, Jeff Marriott, Bobby Nash. I'm saving the first name on your list for you to pronounce.
Hardeye. Charles is the guru behind Hard Case Crimes, the novels and the comics from Titan Books.
Shame on me for not recognizing that right away. And yeah, Charles is amazing and also making great books as well. as bringing back old pulp and paperback novels. But yeah, Hard Case Crime is a fantastic paperback imprint. But then you got Bobby Nash, Liz Braswell.
Yeah. Now, Liz is interesting because she's mostly known as a YA writer, especially for the Disney Twisted Tales and princess novels. But she's a longtime friend, and I've enjoyed her writing. And I thought this would be a change of pace for her, and she jumped at the opportunity. The other two writers I've got, there's William F. Wu, a more traditional SF writer. And then Win Scott Eckert, who has written Tarzan and other licensed pulp characters through the years.
Yeah, just like Jeff Marriott, I recognized Win's name.
Mm-hmm.
And Priest, my God, Priest and Elliot Magan. I mean, they speak for themselves.
Well, we know Elliot is a good prose writer because of the Miracle Monday and Last Son of Krypton novels from years ago. Priest hasn't done a lot of prose, and he was telling me about this one detective story a couple of years ago when we were at the Baltimore Comic-Con together. And I said, let me publish it. And he finally said, okay.
Oh, that's great, man. Because I know he did one of those early 2000s DC tie-in novels, and it was a Green Lantern novel. So I know he wrote that.
Yeah,
but again, that was like 20 years ago, man, or close to it.
Yeah, Copperberg was editing the novels for Byron Price through licensing.
Yeah.
So Priest wrote one of the 3 Green Lantern books. Mm-hmm.
Good stuff, man. Well, again, I'm you had me in a low because I'm a huge pulp fan anyway, and love the classic pulps, and nothing delighted me more back in the day to run into people like Jerry Conway and Steranko at pulp shows that are hardcore pulp shows, and they're hardcore collectors.
Every time I begin one of these projects, I create a wish list, and I know a lot of comic people who have written prose who haven't done a lot of it. So I go back to Marv Wolfman, Jerry Conway, Steve Englehart, people like that. And I go, come on, come do one more for me. And Jerry's basically said, I'm retired. Marv's busy with comic book stuff. So, God bless him. Steve has always been on the fence and has never committed. So hopefully one day I'll get him. And there are others out there, but I always start with a long wish list, and I pick up the phone or email and I call people and I was like, you interested? Especially with 3 books now, they see what I've done. And sure. I'm really hoping, that's going to just continue to open doors for me.
I get it, man. And again, I think the writers you get are fantastic. And I just love these. And, I was telling you off the air, and I wanted you to tell me about this. I really respect guys like yourself and Mike and Paul, a lot of the Crazy 8 people that are, not kids anymore and aren't waiting for that opportunity and phone call or email. They're making their own way. And that's something I'm trying to do with Word Balloon as well as with my podcast. But it is not easy, coming up with this stuff. And I think you do it quite well. And I know the group of people that I've read in the past of your books, they all do it quite well. So tell me.
Thank you. It's interesting. It's the technology that has changed and distribution channels that have changed.
Sure.
That have allowed people as they age out of writing monthly comic books, because that's really what it is. It's aging out as tastes change, turnover, whatever. Sure. So when I was at DC handing out assignments, I'd have to sit down with Don Heck and say, tastes have changed, Don. They're not as interested in your work anymore. And he had nowhere else to go because there weren't a lot of other publishers.
Yep.
So he'd get what he'd get until, he retired. And he was not alone. There was that whole generation. As the 80s and independent publishing started to become a thing, then, a number of them could write for an Eclipse or a Pacific. Get a story here and there. I mean, Jerry Siegel's last stuff was for Eclipse.
Yep.
So, you watch that evolution, and when self-publishing became a thing around 2010, 2011, that opened up the doors for a lot of us to find new acts. And it took time to figure out how to do it. Some of us mastered the technology for the marketing or how to format our own books. Finding relatively inexpensive artists became, possible for covers, and we could do our own books. And, Crazy Eight exists specifically so that all of us independent writers of varying ages and experiences could come together and have a common hub, so that if you like Roscoe Chamiro's SF crime noir novels, well, you come to Crazy Eight to read about it and go, oh, Mary Fan writes fantasy stuff. That might be interesting. So you find each other.
Yeah. No, I get it, man. And again, I think it's a great combination of stories. As you say, there are sci-fi stories, there are crime stories, there are superhero stories. Is there horror?
Some. This time around, we've narrowed the number of genres based on feedback I've gotten. Not a lot of people are interested in the war and the Western as much. Certainly, I stopped with romance after the second book because there wasn't interest. So we've got sword and sorcery, science fiction, crime, something super heroic, and supernatural.
Excellent. That's awesome. Steve Commander is saying hello.
Hey, Steve.
Good to see you, Steve. Thank you for watching. He's at work. But yeah, I think this is great. As we said, you're just over 50% of the way there. Some of the perks that we're looking at, you're going to have, if you make it at 12,500, there's going to be 3 bookmarks. So they have the previous covers.
I haven't decided how to design them as yet. I was going to talk to book designer Aaron Rosenberg, who also was writing for the book, what I was going to do. But I knew it was a relatively low cost extra I could have printed up. So, kids get something, I get something, and we move on. I really want to get to the illustrations because, I always bring in a lot of my comic book peers.
Yeah.
Now that I'm teaching college, I want to be able to possibly open up the door for some of my students.
That's great, man. Remind people of your course that you're teaching and what college you're at. So
Maryland Institute College of Art, otherwise known as MICA. It's here in Baltimore. The course is for seniors, and it's called Making Graphic Novels. So basically, over the course of the 14-week semester, they have to write and draw a 30-page story, and I help them shape it and work with them one-on-one, or they get group peer sessions. I bring in guest speakers. So they're getting something for the time and investment. So I'm acting more as an editor than anything else here, and it's certainly enjoyable using those skills again.
No question. Absolutely, man. No, you're one of the more experienced editors out there, and I think that's only going to help these kids as they are figuring out their own ideas and making their own books. I'm so pleased with the amount of accredited colleges that are accepting and get the graphic novel business. And I always like to tell this story where Brian Bendis started at one university teaching, and they pulled the runabout from under him. They had a new head of the English department, and it's like, no, I don't like comic books, and I really don't think that is practical for the real publishing world. Those are my words. And so he got let go, and Portland State University is like, hey, man, come on over. We'd love to have you. And he's been there for years now. And also Dave Walker has followed, so many great comic book people. Diana Schutz, I'm sure you know.
No, Diana and I go way back.
Yeah, and she just stepped down and retired. But Shelley Bond has taken her course over. And Dave Walker, I know, is helping Brian with his course and everything. I think it's terrific, man.
I have to give Brian props. When he was in Baltimore a couple of years ago, and I was telling him I was about to do this course for the first time, he immediately said, whatever you need. I'll give you my syllabus. I'll give you my materials. He gave me a PDF of his book on creating comics.
Yeah.
He was like, have at it. He was
That's great.
And what's interesting is early in my, I've been down in Maryland now for 11 years. And 2 or 3 years in, I said, none of the local colleges or universities have graphic novel courses, survey courses, what is a graphic novel, how to read them, what they're all about. So I came up with a syllabus, recommended reading, and I pitched the English department chairs at all these schools. Had to be like 8 or 9 of them in, wherever I could drive to.
Sure.
Zero response. Not a no thank you, just silence.
Wow.
Weird.
Well, I hope they're paying attention to the book market these days.
Who can
And
say?
and you mentioned and I forgive me, I forget her name, that came from Disney YA to help you in one of your
Liz?
Liz, yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, no, it's funny. I was listening to Heidi McDonald's podcast today,
Mm-hmm.
and she was pointing out that web comics like webtoons, Korean web comics
Mm-hmm.
have kind of supplanted anime, or rather manga, and where manga was in the 90s and early 2000s, now the buzz is about the Korean product. And I find that really interesting.
Yeah, me too. And I really wasn't as aware of it until I was judging for the Ringo Awards for the Baltimore Comic Con.
Sure.
I was one of the judges this year, and Webtoons, submitted quite a few.
Sure.
So I steeped myself. It was eye-opening, really interesting.
And where vertical comics, as they've also been called other than web comics,
Mhm.
where they started in the early 2000s, and I remember Scott McClown's wonderful Understanding Comics and
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of the early adapters of web comics. And again, where it is today and the fact that there is big money behind it. God, I felt terrible when Zuda from DC
Uh-huh.
didn't happen or didn't work beyond its initial release.
I don't know enough about what happened at Zuda to say, did it not work, or was the company impatient? No idea, but that stuff was really fun to read.
Oh my God! And suddenly, all these creators that had these great stories and stuff, absolutely, man. It was just a really great shot in the arm, and that's the way the Korean thing is. As is again the fact that you guys like yourself can crowdfund and create without having the safety net of or backing of a publisher, and also just do it on your own terms. I mean, and the thing that drives me nuts. I was telling you, I'm working on a book project myself.
Right.
And I have talked to some publishers, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it'll come out in like 2 years." And I'm like, 2 years? Fuck that. I'm like, and also not the biggest advances. So I'm like, maybe I'll just do this on my own.
What impresses me are the graphic novels that go to crowdfunding and basically meet their goal in hours. I am so jealous because, it's taking me, I'm 5 days into this and I'm only halfway there. And some of these guys, crowdfunded an hour. And I back dozens of them.
Sure.
I find them interesting to read. I'm supporting friends, whatever.
Yeah.
I just wish, there was that much interest in the pro stuff. But I give a lot of these people credit to find a way to get their stuff out there and build an audience.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, it's amazing. Here's some comments from the people watching right now. Mike says Dean Wormer must have been at Bendis' first college. Maybe, man. And then Steve says, I just wanted to thank you, Bob, for on behalf of all of us who grew up thinking we'd be working for you at DC. You made all of our childhoods better. And Mike says,
Thanks,
I want to
Steve.
second that. Also a big fan of Comic Scene, where I was able to get a copy in the UK back in the day. Was that a magazine that you contributed to, Bob? Or was it your magazine? Yeah, wow. Bob, forgive me, man.
No. So I was at Starlog Press working on Fangoria and Starlog.
Yeah.
And they were looking to expand. And I pitched them the idea that, you're doing some comics coverage in both magazines. Maybe you want a magazine about comics, animation, and comic strips. So I wrote up a proposal. They took it to the distributor, who said, maybe, but what would you put in the second issue? So I came up with 3 single-spaced typewritten pages, because this is 1982. There is no, word processor yet. Pitching, all these ideas, and cable distribution came back and said, okay, we'll take it. So I had a magazine. It was a bi-monthly. lasted 11 issues. And the weird thing, to this day, I do not understand it. The circulation director was showing me sales was starting to go higher from 9 to 10 and 10 to 11, but the publisher canceled it with 11, thinking it wasn't going to work.
Wow.
And then it came, different editor, Dave McDonnell, brought it back a few years later, and then it lasted for quite a while. But no, that's my baby. That's one of my prides and joy.
What year were you doing Comic Scene?
First issue came out in November 81.
Okay. Yeah, honestly, man, as soon as you start talking, I'm like, wait a minute, I bought Comic Scene. You know what I loved inside the magazine, beyond the specific articles, was there'd be am I right, a film and TV in development section?
That was in Dave's run of the. There wasn't
me.
enough for me to do that, and then there weren't enough resources. But by the time Dave brought the magazine back, yeah, that was again pre-internet that we know today. That was your go-to source.
Absolutely. Did you have an active mailbag? Did it take a while? Again, only 11 issues.
I got fan mail. In fact, it was great because we did a piece about Dick Tracy in one issue, one of the early issues. Got a fan letter from the director, John Landis, about the article. It was like, all right,
that's great.
Someone's reading my magazine.
That's fantastic, man. Jesus, that's amazing. That's like Tom King was on last night, and Stephen King. I forget which comic book he acknowledged that Tom wrote, and Tom was over the moon that Stephen King was aware of who he was, let alone actually read and liked something they wrote. Also, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, big comic book reader.
Yeah, I gathered that, and if you haven't, he's written a couple of Sherlock Holmes novels featuring his brother Mycroft, which I read the first of them, and they were pretty good.
Absolutely, man. I had him on Word Balloon when the second one came out. And I was thrilled. And I'm like, you got to understand that all my nerd listeners and viewers are going to be pretty blown away that you're a nerd too. And he's like, hey, man, we were the readers. He goes, our imaginations were lit by this stuff. And it cracked me up. He had very detailed opinions of Predator and Alien and where the mythology was going. And wanted to tell me chapter and verse what he agreed with and what he didn't agree with. And I'm like, this is fantastic.
That's great when you can find that well of nerddom.
Absolutely. I know. Hey, man, they're not going to make fun of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah, go ahead, man. Read what you want. Because I asked him, he said he was a big heavy metal fan. And I said, did you bring them with you to, practice at the Laker practices and stuff? He's like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, did anyone give you grief? He's like, no. And I'm like, you're damn right they didn't. That's good. Good for you, man.
It's like those pictures that have surfaced of like the Beatles reading an issue of Green Lantern or something. They were fans.
Yeah, no care. Or Dean Martin. I love that Dean Martin got his look from Captain Marvel Jr. Or excuse me.
No,
well, both. Yes, Dean Martin for his haircut, but Elvis for the costumes.
Okay, yeah,
the Vegas costumes. Which thanks a lot, man. Can you design something that looks like Freddie Freeman? Yeah, sure, no problem. Let me talk to our seamstress. That's great, man. Yes, Mike, you're right. Yes, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did indeed fight Bruce Lee in Game of Death, I believe. I think it was that movie. But yeah, pretty crazy stuff. And Bruce taught Kareem, and also I believe Chuck Norris was also a student of this. I know they fought in a movie, but I'm pretty certain both of them were students of Bruce's in his martial arts classes and stuff. Well, anyway, no, I'm excited. The one goal I really hope you'll hit, and that's the book club.
Yeah, that's something I conceived as I was coming up with, new stretch goals. It occurred to me that I'm in book clubs, so why can't I have one about my own book? And I figured running it 6 months after the book is distributed and invite all the backers to come online. I'd have some of the authors with me, and we talk about the stories. We'll see if we get there. That's the ultimate stretch goal at the moment. I'm lining up a couple of surprise stretch goals. Should we, start inching our way up that way? One I just secured yesterday that's tickled me. So I want to get there.
I hope so, man. No, I think that would be great if you're able to do it. And I would be very curious and to be a fly on the wall and everything on said book club. But I think that's really a great opportunity, especially given the writers that you keep company with and the possibilities of who might be in on that book club. I think that would be very cool.
When you're an author and you're invited into one of these crowdfunding books, there's more than just writing the story. The editors always expect the authors to help promote it in their social media circles. We also hope that they will contribute something like a Tuckerization or a digital copy, of something else that they have done to help sweeten the pot. And I cannot be happier with the level of cooperation I've received in all 4 books. So it's been
wonderful. Yeah, that's amazing, man. Very, very cool.
Some of these writers, I've had to explain what a Tuckerization is, which is fine. Once they understand what it is, they go, "Oh yeah, I'll throw in one."
It beyond the Kickstarter people, do you sell the books at Crazy Eights? And further, beyond online, have you had any luck in terms of putting them in stores?
Couple answers to that. Yes, we sell print copies and digital copies through Amazon. I get monthly royalties. They're not big, but they add up month over month of being part of the Kindle Unlimited. So I get
Oh, great.
pennies per page or something.
Sure. Yeah. So if people don't know, when you subscribe to Kindle Unlimited, there are free books.
Oh, yeah.
That just for the purpose of you being a member, so you're paying a monthly fee, but you have access to a ton of stuff. And I didn't know Thrilling Adventures was part of it.
Yeah, we're all 4. Well, the first 3 are there, and the 4th will be there too. And beyond that, we're available through the major distributor, Ingram, Baker and Taylor. So bookstores can get them if they're interested. The one thing we haven't really cracked yet is the library market. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
I understand. No, absolutely. Are they trade paperback size?
Yeah. Yeah. The
Okay.
traditional, trade edition, just about everything else on the book, in bookstore shelves.
So not your classic paperback size, but the bigger oversized.
Yeah. I wish I had a copy in front of me, but
don't worry, buddy. Yeah. No, that's cool.
6x9.
Yeah, 6x9. So the people know. Yeah, again, I think the audience can visualize what a trade paperback looks like these days.
Of course, the book is designed to look like a pulp magazine, so it's double columned with the font and title treatments, which is one reason why having the illustrations is cool. And the last book, we actually offered custom advertisements. If people wanted something advertised, we would make it look like the old Pulp ads. And 2 people, backed that last time, and hopefully more will do it this time.
God, that'd be great. That's fantastic. I think Mike said that he just ordered bought the campaign. He just purchased. He's just back to current campaign. There you go. Great lineup of writers. The system works, John. Or Bob. That's what I tell everyone.
Well, I'm making the rounds of the podcast. I'm trying to get websites to cover this.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I am not the only book out there, and a lot of the comic book people go, "Well, those are nice names with comic pedigrees, but it's not a comic book." So,
well, don't worry. We don't make that. That rule here. No.
Now you talk to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, that's great.
Here, Ed Cato jumping in with a comment.
Hey, Ed.
Again, I'm having trouble with my putting my comments on screen, but he said, "Oh man, I love these new pulps, and I love everything Bob does." That's excellent, man.
Ed's a good guy, and he's now taking over Retro Fan now that Michael Urey is retiring at Tomorrow's. So I look forward to actually writing for him over there. I've got some.
That's great, man. That's great to hear. I was going to ask if there are other magazines or books that you contribute to, and I know obviously the Crazy Eight stuff. But yes, Ed, in fact, is going to be on. As I've told you, I'm going to be at Terrificon this weekend.
Yes.
But when I get back, I'm going to be scheduling a talk with Ed, and we'll be talking about him taking over Retro Fan. And
for one of Michael's last issues, I wrote about the TV show The Name of the Game from the 60s.
Yes.
And for Michael's last issue of Back Issue, big piece on Crisis on Infinite Earths for a 40th anniversary issue coming out in 25.
Wow, that's good Lord, 40 years ago. Sad, and we both remember it well. Jesus Christ, you more so than me, but that's great. Very excited. No, in fact, Ed and I talked on the phone after he came back from San Diego, and he was telling me about your Name of the Game article,
yeah?
and I had to ask. And there's a Steven Spielberg made a handful of TV movies before he graduated to the big time.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was a kid that literally like almost grew up on the Universal lot. If you've seen, what's the name of the movie now? The Fabelmans.
Yeah,
It's
good movie.
great movie, fictionalized version of Spielberg's story. And there was one in particular, Name of the Game episode that I remember fondly.
Los Angeles 2017. Yeah.
Tell people what that story was about.
Oh God, it was
I know if you don't know.
Waking up, and it's 2017, and it's
Yeah.
a dystopia. It's one of the first dystopias on TV, I think.
Yes, and I mean it makes sense because it was of that Damnation Alley and Boy and his dog and Silent Running era, but it was a TV movie.
But it was Spielberg's, one of his first TV shows, and it was atmospheric in a way the rest of the Universal glitz and shine of Name of the Game. It stood out so differently.
Well, and it's shot underground because Barry is writing an article about carbon dioxide or whatever,
Yeah, it had an ecological theme.
Right. And he's driving and something happens and he kind of as always, it's a dream. But the noxious fumes from his car makes him pass out and he wakes up and it's 2017 and it's this jackboot future and everything's shot below ground because the atmosphere is too toxic for people to live on the surface and stuff. No, it's this really neat movie. I'm bummed. I was telling Ed, but I think they yanked it down off of YouTube. Some bootleg video guy had a VHS copy of it that they taped off of TV when it was presented as a Saturday night movie, and it was from Chicago television, and it had the local commercials and everything.
I could not get someone at Universal Home Entertainment to give me a quote for the article as to why that show has not been collected, given some of its pedigree.
Oh my God!
It's not streaming anywhere. It's not on. It never hit DVD, let alone Blu-ray or anything like it.
Just like I was telling you about Tom King and his Stephen King story, we were talking about some of those great Universal shows from the early '70s that are not on Peacock. And no, you're right, man. No, Universal was called the Factory, I believe. Maybe yes. GMGM. But regardless, yeah. I mean, especially the television division from the 50s through, I would say, through Hunter in the mid 80s, they had the top people working there. Everybody that is a big name in TV, from Jack Webb to Stephen Cannell and Stephen Bochco, all these great television creators cut their teeth at Universal starting in the 50s. And
they had so much product to produce. It was a great, just like Corman gave filmmakers an opportunity at young ages because they could work for cheap. Universal had so many shows to produce. And back then, the seasons were 26, 28 episodes each. People had a chance to crack in, and there weren't writers' rooms, so there were a lot of writers getting their job. So, yeah, I mean, it was a real interesting time.
I agree. No, that's a great series. Gene Barry, Robert Stack, Tony Franciosa, right?
Yes.
And they all worked for a magazine.
Yeah. Glenn Howard, Howard Enterprises, based on the Time Life publications. So, Tony Franciosa was the writer for People magazine before there was a People magazine.
That's awesome. Yeah, man. No, great stuff. And it was an anthology wheel in the same way that Columbo, Macmillan and Wife McCloud, a lot of the mystery movies of NBC were rotating shows.
In the earlier 60s was something called the Bold One. So there was a doctor show and a lawyer show. But Name of the Game made the wheel really work, which is how the mystery movies followed.
There you go. I didn't realize it was a predecessor to the wheel.
And then when Warner tried it with Search, Tony Franciosa again, they just didn't have the same quality of people, even though Leslie Stevens was the producer.
I love Search. I mean, I was that kid that was watching every week, and it was so cool. And for people who don't know about Search, it was this weird kind of cool tech secret agent organization, and it was Gene Barry again, or no, Hugh O'Brien.
Hugh O'Brien. Tony
Doug
Franciosa,
Tony
and
Franciosa and Doug McClure. Yeah. And on their person, and now no big deal because the technology is so rampant, but they had jewelry that had hidden microphones and cameras.
But more than that, it could do infrared, and plus it was reading biosigns. So back in Mission Control, run by Burgess Meredith, you had somebody checking the medical, somebody who was constantly looking up data on tapes, because this is all pre-internet. But the idea that people were wearing implants to be able to hear and communicate, as well as the scanner, it really was a forerunner that the critics poo-pooed as nonsense, but really was forward-looking.
100%, man. It's like the tech that Star Trek introduced, and now we're living with it and everything. No, it was great.
So I ripped it off. I ripped off the basic concept for my contribution to Mike Friedman's Phenomenon's Shared Universe books that Crazy 8 did, the third of which just came out. But
yeah,
had the series, I had the opportunity to work with it more than the three we've done so far. What I really wanted to be able to do is, how much more machinery do you get before you're feeling less than human? How invasive is it? How about the fact that, you get interested in the, somebody at a bar and everyone back in Mission Control is like, he's going to score.
That's hilarious. And, it was very, very mission
issues.
Say it again.
There were privacy issues that you could have gotten into. So,
oh, sure.
To me, Warner Brothers writing in the early 70s was not as sharp as Universal's was, and they touched none of those issues. And I just thought it was a missed opportunity.
I could see that. No. And the format of the show, everybody, in Mission Control, it was very NASA-esque in terms of the setup for Mission Control. And yeah, the Spy Master was Burgess Meredith right there in Mission Control. And in the agent's ears as they were in the field and everything. It was fantastic. Absolutely. No, I love that show.
Yeah, and I love the fact that Warner Archive actually remastered it and put it out on disc.
Yeah. No, I bought it. I know what you mean. Mike says, I remember Bob writing a piece in the DC Heroes role-playing game about the DC Universe and carefully giving vague hints to the pending Crisis miniseries. Is that true?
Yeah. Mayfair Games had the license for DC RPGs, and somehow I got roped into approving the content and was able to do some contributions to it. And then later Paul Kupperberg wrote the DC Atlas based on internal notes for the Mayfair games. So yeah, we had a lot of synergy going on back then. That's
cool. That's great, man. Did you work on the infamous Watchmen Mayfair tie-in book?
I did not work on it. I merely looked at art and some of the text, I believe. Barbara Kiesel was the editor of the Watchmen at that point, so Barbara probably did most of the reading on it.
Okay. Yeah. No, they released that. They re-released it a couple of years ago. I know I want to say during COVID, and or if not right after COVID. But yeah, I was surprised, and again, I remember it fondly from comic shops and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you
think? They did a really good job when RPGs were catching on across the world, and everyone was doing licenses and all. I thought they did a very respectable job.
Yeah, no, that was that was another fun era. Now, it's funny because we mentioned earlier about the 80s and some of the creator-owned stuff that was coming out, the black and white era and stuff. And what did you, as someone that was employed at DC and stuff, what did you think about that independent product as it was coming out back then?
I was reading the stuff and then covering at a comic scene before I joined DC in '84. So, I thought what Don McGregor and Dean Mulaney were doing with things like Ragamuffins and Detectives Inc. was just wonderful, and trying different things by being graphic novels, and Ragamuffin shooting from Gene Colan's pencils, and trying things that hadn't been done before. Pacific tried some great stuff, and of course they gave us Gru with Sergio Aragones, and then Dave Stevens' Rocketeer. So it wasn't just more superheroic stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
By the time I got to DC, First had already launched, and they were at least doing different types of superheroic stuff with John Sable plus Warp. They were not trying to do superheroes in the traditional way DC and Marvel were, so they were trying to fill in between. We saw them as, good comics, some fun stuff. Some of the other smaller publishers like a Kamiko, the quality was hit or miss. They were definitely trying, and we looked at it all because that's where you're going to find your next talent. They're cutting their teeth there.
No, I can. Well, and certainly, the first Exodus with Michael bringing over Tim Truman and Mike Grell back to DC,
and Ostrander.
Of course, the great John Ostrander and Suicide Squad and great books like that. No, again, and that was my. I think those were my college years. I have to kind of get it settled in my brain, but no, and I mean editorially, I always appreciated Eclipse and their editorial sense because I thought they had interesting choices.
Yeah, and I give them credit picking up the Pacific books when Pacific went under. Unfortunately, then they got flooded, so they went literally under.
I remember that. Yeah,
just could not recover from that. It was a really interesting time, and I wish Dean and Kat were able to continue it. Dean these days is doing brilliant stuff with the comic strip collection, so at least he's still contributing to our field.
100%, man. No, I love those comic strip collections. I'm bummed, although you can through King Features has Comics Kingdom, and I know Tribune has its own features that if you really miss the comics in the newspapers and you want more than if your local newspaper still runs a comics page, you can go to those things, subscribe, and curate your own comics section, and it's great.
But if you want to go back to the classic stuff, those are few and far between. The Hermes stuff doesn't come out often enough.
Yeah.
Some of the the great Stan Drake and Leonard Starr stuff just gets collected here and there, but not in a library to read like on stage or something.
No, I get it.
Would be wonderful.
Clover Press, I think, is doing a decent job. They're a new player.
They're the one doing Terry and the Pirates?
Yes.
Yeah, nice
Popeye.
stuff.
They did Popeye as well. It's an interesting time, and I hear you, and I agree. I wish that stuff was more prevalent. I will say, though, for Comics Kingdom, you can curate and put vintage strips in there. I was doing I was doing Big Ben Bolt with John Cullen Murphy, and which, of course, I'm a boxing freak, so if it's about a heavyweight fighter, you had me at hello. And also, I believe I was getting Dan Barry's Flash Gordon.
Some of that was collected back in the 90s, I think. When Dan came over to do some stuff at DC in the late 80s, it was interesting hearing him. He was a little full of himself, but he had some good stories, and he certainly could draw.
That's cool. No, any encounters with and now why am I blanking the famous war editor Robert
Kanigher?
Yeah, Bob Kanigher. Any Bob Kanigher stories?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, Bob was okay. So summer 1980, I brought on staff to work this summer at DC, and it's before I get to Starlog. It was just a summer gig that Paul Levitz was helping me out with some stuff. I wound up doing, helping him. Kanigher would come in once or twice a week to plot out stuff at GI Combat with Murray Boltinoff, and they were catty cornered down the hall from where Andy Helfer and I were sharing an office, and they got loud because Murray was calling Kanigher on the cliches and the tropes and give me something I haven't read 10 times. And Kanigher's like, oh no, this has got a spin on it you've never seen before. And Kanigher's, Bolton was like, yes, you did it 10 years ago. And it just back and forth. And then, they'd hammer out the stories and they'd go. But you catch him in the hallway, especially when I was on staff in 84 and I saw him again. He was still writing for Murray before he retired. Bob had no sense of personal space. He'd get within an inch or two of you. And, at the time, graphic novels were just becoming a thing. DC had done a few. Marvel was doing theirs. And he was telling me about a 1,500-page magnum opus graphic novel that he's been working on for years. And, never got the details of the story, but boy, was it going to change the world. And, I'd hear about his affairs. I'd hear about his dueling scar. all the stories you've heard about in all the various interviews, he just recycled them all for new editors.
That's great.
He was a character, there's no question. But in 1973, I think it was, my father somehow wrangled me a tour of the DC offices, and Kanigher had just come back to take over Wonder Woman, so this is the Nubia era.
Oh.
And I mean, Carol Fine, Jeanette's, at the time it was Carmine's assistant, introduces me, and I said, "Pleasure to meet you. I'm just in the process of writing a letter telling you I'm really not crazy about what you've done." He gets up and he comes over to me and he goes, "You wouldn't know the first thing to do if you sat behind that desk." And I was like, it's 1973, so I'm like 12, 13 years old. I'm just, middle school. Of course I wouldn't know what to do. But no, he, didn't want to hear it.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, they weren't used to fandom obviously coming up to him and telling them what they really think.
Yeah, but I was so enjoying the Sikowski O'Neill stuff that when we got back to the retro, it was like, this wasn't working for me.
I was an idiot at the 2006 New York Comic-Con. I think it was 06, maybe it's a little later, when Gloria Steinem had a booth next to Neil Adams, actually.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
And Gloria was working with a public service comic book, and I don't remember what the cause was, but it was really cool, and it had a feminist thing to it. And I was talking to Neil, and he's like, "You got to go talk to Gloria Steinem. When's the next when are you ever going to get a chance to ever meet her again?" And I'm like, he goes, "She's never going to do another Comic-Con." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. All right." So I walk over, and like an idiot, and God bless her, she was very patient with me. And I wasn't, it's not like I wouldn't stop blathering about this, but I did say, I really feel like Denny O'Neil's Wonder Woman run was misunderstood. And I said, "Listen, I totally get where you were coming from, but I said, he wanted to make her more street level relevant." And I go, his inspirations were Diana Rigg and the Avengers and strong women, and wanted to keep the idea that she was strong, but she just didn't have her powers anymore. And she went, "I disagree." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm not going to."
That's what happens.
Yeah. Well, and even God bless Denny, man. Even Denny's like, "Yeah, I wasn't." He goes, I took Wonder Woman's powers away. What was I thinking?" Which I love that Denny, man, culpa near the end and everything. So,
if I recall, it wasn't entirely Denny's idea.
Oh,
when Carmine made Sikowski the editor, I think it was together.
I didn't know Mike was the editor along with the artist. Wow.
Yeah, when Carmine took over, when everybody left, he made Sikowski editor, gave him Wonder Woman and Supergirl, and I forget what else he had, Metalman. He was plotting Wonder Woman. Then he was just scripting it.
Interesting. I did not know that. Were there other creators that became editors when Carmine took over like that?
Well, that's when Kubert became an editor. When Kanigher took a break, and so Kubert came in and did the war books.
Yeah.
Sikowski came in. I even think Murphy consulted now. A little bit. Murphy Anderson on some of the stuff, but Joe Orlando came in. So those three artists right there. Bringing in Orlando, Kubert, and Sikowski was a fundamental shift in the approach to the stories, and then Dick followed.
Oh, excellent! Sure, I noticed that Jeanette was just kind of. Was it? No, excuse me. It was a couple of years ago. I know they were going to honor Levitz this year at San Diego, and he got sick, so he couldn't make it at the last minute, which is too bad. But I remember he interviewed. Am I right, Jeanette? Jeanette Kahn. All right, I couldn't think of Jeanette's last name for a second. Yeah, and man, what a great interview. And obviously, she was already established when you full time. I assume joined at DC. Yeah, tell me about her as a publisher. What was she like?
In the first few years I was there, she was very involved, always down the hall talking to editors and with Dick, some of the creators. She and Paul changed the environment at DC and made it as creator friendly as possible, and that meant Jeanette getting involved with them socially, lunches, poker games, whatever. So she made herself very accessible. She was reading the book, so she could talk to them about what they were doing. So she understood the stories, and she was a big fan of things like Warlord and Jonah Hex, and let more of the not superhero stuff.
Yeah,
loved Superman and Batman, but was drawn more to the other types of storytelling. So when I got there, and obviously I was brought on to work on Crisis in Who's Who, there were several meetings she was involved with to hear the ideas. And then, she was hands off, once she liked what she heard. But, she'd wander the halls and she'd chat. She was always accessible that way. She'd have an idea or she wanted to brainstorm, she'd ask you down to her office, which was the most eclectic, publisher's office you probably will ever see. And she was great. But, as we merged with Time, and then as I left in 2000, AOL was on the horizon, she got more and more involved in the corporate stuff and less visible in editorial.
I understand. Man, I was a fan of hers, not knowing at the time, but when her magazine that came through Scholastic Books, Dynamite, and I bought Dynamite every and it was great, and it was so thrilling because it would have a section where they would retell an origin story of a superhero, and it was great. And they had panels from the comic, and it was presented like an article, but they would have these panels and stuff, and it's like, oh my God, this is great! I love that I'm reading about Doctor Strange in my Scholastic Book magazine.
It was the success of that and Pizzazz, right?
Yep. Yes, that was the one that followed Pizzazz. Absolutely.
That put her on the radar when they were looking to replace Carmine because something wasn't working. Sales were not good, and Marvel was eating their lunch.
And she was selling to that age demographic that DC wanted to tap into, right. And she was already doing it. So yeah, I know it made perfect sense. I remember that fantastic first, kind of like Stan's soapbox, but it was like a full page, and it had that. I forget who did the drawing, but who did it? Neil, of course. Neil Adams did that great drawing of Jeanette, and it's like I think I look more like Mary Tyler Moore in this drawing. That's great, man. No, very, very, very cool. I think that again, I really felt like she and Dick Giordano really came in with a breath of fresh air, and really the meanwhile inserts that were in every comic and everything. Those were great.
Let's back up just a moment. When Jeanette came in, bit by bit, as Paul was tutoring her in comicdom and how comics worked, and Joe Orlando was rising as an executive editor because he had these creative ideas. And Joe, everyone credits Dick with a lot of stuff, but Joe was there first.
Okay.
So I want to make sure Joe gets his due.
I'm glad.
Joe helped Jeanette get us into the implosion, out of the implosion. Dick didn't come on. He joined in October 80, became executive editor by the end of 81. So Joe was there for the first half dozen years of Jeanette's run. And I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that.
I'm glad you mentioned Joe. No, absolutely. And so then was he in charge of the mystery and
he'd been doing, he had a very large workload of, adventure and weird Western tales, weird war tales, and, a lot of different books with Paul as his assistant. So there was a lot of volume, but over time, Joe gave up books. Other people came on to become editors. Denny, Jack Harris, Tony Isabella briefly. They took some of the workload away from Joe, who then got called in with his experience, Mad and elsewhere, as DC started licensing things like the Superhero Super Healthy Cookbook, or the DC Encyclopedia that the Kubert Studio did art for. So that evolved into the special projects department by the time I was there in the summer of '80. So Joe was getting less involved in the monthly comics. So when Dick came in, he was the natural guy to take comics while Joe moved over to special projects.
Gotcha. Very interesting. No, I didn't realize that. Mike wants to know who the best poker player in the DC offices was at that time.
I was not at those games. I could not tell you. I gather people like Denny and Paul and Len and Marv were certainly they were regulars, and I gather they were sharp players. When you were at Terrificon, S. Kupperberg, he was there.
Okay, there you go. All right, I'll have to do that. Honestly, Bob, I love this, and I love where our conversation went. And again, I want to remind everybody that there's 2 weeks left to back the thrilling adventure anthology of Pulp Stories, the 2025 edition. It's the 4th edition, and a great roster of some of my favorite writers, from Mike Friedman, Paul Kupperberg, yourself, and also guys like Priest and Elliot Magan. This is great. And Charlie from Hard Case Crime. This is, I think you've assembled another great, interesting group of people.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And
Absolutely.
We're at 54%. So thank you.
Yeah. So hit Kickstarter, everybody, and look for Bob Greenberger and Thrilling Adventure, the Pulp collection. And I think it's great. You can get it digitally, or you can get a soft cover trade back edition.
Yeah, I'm getting questions about doing the hardcover like I've done for the first 3. It's costly. I want to make sure there's enough interest for people to jump on and be worth it. Probably will go there.
Oh, okay. Well, and regardless, we want to see you make enough on the Kickstarter beyond the initial goal to get spot illustrations in the book. And
yes,
that book club as well, and perhaps more stretch goals as the campaign continues.
Like I said, I got a couple, at least 2 up my sleeve that I'll unveil as we get there.
Sounds good, man. Bob, thanks a lot. You take care of yourself. It was great seeing you. Thanks, everybody, for watching. There won't be any Word Balloon Lives for the next couple days because I'll be in Connecticut for Terrificon, where I will be audio recording and video recording a bunch of the panels that I'm doing. I'm doing 2 Star Trek panels, Bob. One with the DS9 people,
nice.
And one with the Strange New Worlds people. It was going to be 3, but man, God bless Walter Koenig, who's 87 and unfortunately got COVID in Vegas.
Oh no!
So yeah, let's all hope Walter is around for many years to come. But yeah, I was kind of bummed. I was looking forward to having a conversation with Walter as well. So I want to ask him about the Gene Roddenberry movie with Rock Hudson, Pretty Maids in a Row.
Oh, that's a bad movie.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But he's one of the cops. He's one of the guys under. I want to say Telly Savalas was the cop in that movie. I forget.
Oh God, it wasn't Telly.
Maybe not. But all I know is it was Rock Hudson as the football coach that was killing all the cheerleaders.
Jimmy Doohan was a cop in the background. He was there.
Yes, and Walter was as well. Yeah, which is kind of awesome that Gene put them in there. That's what I want to ask him about. Not how bad the movie was, but also you get. And forgive me, everybody. I know this is puerile, but if she's not completely naked, you get almost naked Angie Dickinson, which is always worth the. In the early 1970s was quite a treat.
Oh yes.
All right, there you go. Sorry, Bob. Thanks for hanging around during that. You could have left, and I wouldn't have blamed you, but that's all right. All right, everybody, and lots of more great stuff next week on Word Balloons. So I hope you'll join us. Until then, everybody, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.